Hi, I'm Laurel, and I made these.
I feel like sewing something, so you know what? I'ma sew something. I've heard great things about the Blackwood Cardigan and had the pattern sitting around, and who doesn't need more cardigans in their life? Probably a lot of people. But I work in an old office building, so I definitely could use another one. But I'm not making one. No siree, I'ma make two. But don't worry, they'll be a little different. I'm using a French terry for both. Now the blue one is a Rayon poly blend, and the green one, well, it's also a Rayon poly blend, but it's also neon, so I love it. Now the blue cardigan I'm going to be making straight out of the box. So I just trace the pattern as is from the pattern sheet. Now the green one, I'm going to do some alterations to the pattern. I'm also being a bit unconventional and putting the inside of the fabric on the outside. I'm going to add a hood and change up the pockets a little bit, so I need to make some new pattern pieces. Okay, so first I'm starting with the hood. Now I could have just drafted it or just trace one. So I grabbed one of my favorite hoodies, laid the hood flat, and traced around it. For the area at the bottom of the hood, I just stuck in pins to make holes in the tissue so I could connect the dots. And then I darkened the lines so y'all could see it, and then I added a seam allowance. I needed the front seam allowance to match the width of the front band of the piece, so I folded it in half to be the finished width and added that amount to the pattern piece. I then marked the area where I'd cut it on the fold so I wouldn't be dumb and cut it out not on the fold. I then measured out how much space the hood would take up and subtracted it from the front band piece. I just pinned this piece shorter so I could use the pattern piece again. With that done, I could draw out my new pockets. I wanted these to be a little more hoodie-like, so I drew how I wanted the pocket to look on the main pattern piece, then traced that onto a new piece of paper. I then added the seam allowance and made sure to add a larger seam allowance at the top to mirror the side of the front band. So here's the pattern piece, but don't do this. This is wrong. I wasn't thinking right when I did this. The piece should look like this. It still worked out okay, but if you're doing this yourself, learn from my mistake. Okay, now we have all the pieces we need for the green hoodie, so let's cut these out. I laid out all the pieces on the grain lines while trying to squish in all the pieces to use the least amount of fabric possible and cut everything out, using my pattern weights and my trusty rotary cutter. Then when I had all the pieces cut out, I just marked the center, front, and back of the sleeves. I used a chalk marker on the blue one and a washable fabric marker on the green one so I could see the markings. The original pockets are patch pockets, so I had to mark their placement on the blue cardigan on the front pieces as well. Speaking of patch pockets, the pockets have a band at the top for stylish reasons, I'm assuming, so this part had to be sewn first. I serged this part on and then top stitched the seam down. Helen's Closet, where this pattern is from, has a tutorial on their website using WonderTape to put the pockets on. So I used WonderTape, and that tutorial is a reference because it seemed to have the cleanest result. WonderTape is really cool. It's water soluble, so you can use it like double-sided tape and then it melts away when you wash it. So first you tape up the seam allowance, then tape it where you want it on the cardigan. I put a pin in each corner just in case. Then you can sew them on and they don't go all wibbly wonky as you sew it. See? Super cool! Now let's take a look at these green pockets. I used WonderTape a little differently here because I didn't make a top band like the other one. So I taped down the seam allowance edge, then folded it over to look like the top band. And here you can see what happens when you make the pattern piece wrong. The top doesn't go all the way across. So I go ahead and pin on the pattern piece and I'm going to baste it to the front. I'll catch all the edges of it when I sew the rest of the cardigan together. I'm going to go ahead and check that my hand fits nicely in the pocket, and then I realized that I've made a grave conceptual mistake. The horse came to visit and reminded me that cats have claws, and they stick to things, like loops in fabric. So basically I can never wear this cardigan around cats. Ever. To take care of that pocket snafu and to keep the pockets from gaping open while wearing the thing, I tacked down the edges of the pockets with this super stylish stitching that you can't really see from the outside. And then when I hold it up vertical, you can see it doesn't gape. Hooray! Now that we've the pockets attached on both cardigans, we can start sewing these babies together. First at the shoulder seams. I have this really cool foot for my serger that allows me to easily sew on twill tape, which I do to stabilize the shoulders so they don't stretch out and look all goopy later on. I did this on both, even though I'm only showing one. then I can go ahead and put in the sleeves. I'm lazy and only pinned the top of the shoulder, then one pin on each side. Oh, it also makes the sleeves easier to sew in, and that's what we call a win-win. And then I just press the seams using the sewing ham. To sound dorky, it allows you to maintain the shape of the sleeve as you press it and not wrinkle it weird. And yeah, it's called a ham because it looks like a ham. And now I can go ahead and sew up the side seams on both. And believe it or not, this baby is almost halfway done. Now we just have to attach the cuffs to the sleeves. Fun fact, because I was making this green one with the fabric inside out, I kept pinning everything inside out. Luckily, I always caught it before sewing it together. Once the cuffs were stitched into tubes, I marked them and the sleeve holes into quarters, so when I sewed them together, they would stretch evenly. No one wants a wonky cuff that's all weird, like tight on the bottom and loose on top. At this point, I also put on the bottom band, on the bottom of the cardigan. It gets folded in half, and I pressed it for a crisp, even band, and then stitched it on. On the blue one, I top stitched it down to match the pockets and the soon-to-be front band. And on the green one, well, I didn't, because I forgot. Okay, well there's only one thing left to do on this blue one, and that's to put the front band on. It goes on just like the bottom band, but it's thinner. You also have to stitch close the bottom of the band, which I forgot to film. I had to be really careful when stitching it on though to make sure the bottom of the front band aligned as perfect as possible with the bottom of the cardigan. Then I top stitched down the seam, gave it a good press, and my blue cardigan was finished. Okay, back to reality. I've got another cardigan to finish. Because of how I made the hood pattern, I needed to flip over the edge of the fabric so I could stitch it down when I top stitched the front band. I used WonderTape again to keep the edge down. I then stitched up the back of the hood so it'd be a hood. I then sewed the two front band pieces to the edge of the hood. You know, I'm just realizing now I could have made this a lot easier by just making the band longer and having it go all around the hood. Well, next time. Because of how I'm attaching the front and the hood to the body of the cardigan, I had to sew this band a little differently, which meant I'd have to fold over the seam allowance of one side of the front band. WonderTape to the rescue yet again. I swear they aren't paying me. I then pressed the band in half, well, almost in half. I made sure to leave the seam allowance of one side exposed, and then pinned the hood and the band to the cardigan. When I was pinning it on, I realized the band was too short, so I had to unpick it from the hood and cut out a new one. So what happened? Well, I was a dummy and measured around the hood opening instead of the neck opening. So I laid out the pattern pieces again and subtracted the neck measurement instead. Then I just cut out a new piece. Really glad I had leftover fabric, otherwise I'd have to have gotten a little creative. Okay, take two. I pinned the piece on again and lo and behold, it fit this time. Well, I zipped on the band and instead of closing up the bottom of the band beforehand, I stitched it together and flipped it. The nice part about doing it this way was when I stitched on the band, I didn't have to stress about whether it was perfectly lined up or not. The downside of doing it this way was now I needed to top stitch down the other side. I had to line up the side I folded over to cover the seam, then try to make sure I catch the edge when stitching it down. I did a pretty good job. I only had to redo a small section, which is pretty good because unpicking the stitches on this fabric was really hard. But now that it was finished, just a little press and the hooded one is done. Okay, so I'm not the best at modeling, but I gotta say, I absolutely love these cardigans. I wear them all the time. I think part of why I love them is the fabric. It's so drapey and soft. Plus, I found a neon one. The pattern itself is really easy and quick to put together. The blue one only took me maybe an hour and a half start to finish. I've even made 2 more since filming this video. And one of them, surprise, surprise, it's neon. Thanks for watching me make these. If you want to make your own, I put a link to the fabric, the pattern, and even WonderTape in the comments. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!